In the decades since mayoral control of the District of Columbia Public School System, our students have seen some modest gains in their achievement, but massive deficits remain between the potential we see in our children and their opportunities to succeed. The new strategic plan from DCPS states a vision that every student feels loved, challenged, and prepared to positively influence society and thrive in life. That vision resonates strongly with me. My colleagues and I have been extremely concerned with the continued achievement and opportunity gap in the district, especially for our minority, ESL, special ed, and at-risk students. I am very glad to welcome two representatives from DCPS to our meeting tonight. Dr. Wanda Legrand is our new Deputy Chancellor for Social, Emotional, and Academic Development, and Shanita Burney, Chief of the Office of Family and Public Engagement. I believe you have a presentation for us today, and please begin whenever you're ready.
Good evening. My name is Wanda Legrand. I'm the Deputy Chancellor for Social, Emotional, and Academic Development. I am new to the area and new to my role. I started officially on September the 6th, so I can say I've been here longer than 30 days, so I've hopefully accomplished all my 30-day entry plan activities. I think I have thus far. Feel honored to be here with you and to share the strategic plan, and also to answer questions that you have. For the plan, well, I'll tell you a little bit more about myself. I'm here from Indianapolis, Indiana. I was there for 4 years as their Deputy Superintendent for Academics. Prior to then, I worked in North Carolina, and I'm a true North Carolinian. You can probably tell by my accent, and anything that I might say that sounds truly Southern. So I'm a Southern girl at heart. Own it proudly. And in North Carolina, I worked as a principal, initially as a high school math teacher, assistant principal, regional superintendent, so the traditional roles in education. Came to DC, because of the great work that's going on here, that's been going on for at least a decade, and then under Chancellor Antoine Wilson, saw the next phase, or the third phase of the evolution of DC public schools, and decided that this would be a great place to be. And as I jokingly share with him, the great place I could be for the next 10 years. So by then I'll be 60 something, and that'll be probably when I go on home back to North Carolina. But I'm happy to be here. So in our sharing today, we will go through our strategic plan information and some of the slides. This is a very comprehensive presentation, and if you've been in the community, you've seen parts and pieces of it. I will zip through some because you've probably seen it and summarize it, but so that I can leave time for any questions that you may have. And I will spend more time on hitting the high notes of the presentation, and then Shanita and I will be here and available for questions. So in this presentation, we'll talk about the success in the past and how we were building on that, as well as the key elements of the 2017-22 capital commitment. One thing that's important for us that I'll go back to right quick, don't want to zip too fast for you as I get used to your clicker. Please excuse my novice ability here. I think I'm going back to it. It zipped through very quickly. So yes, I'm sorry back there. I want to hit just some key things that will be a theme throughout this presentation. You will hear me talk about bold and big. You will also hear me talk about team, and you will hear about team or collaboration. You will see teamwork or collaboration as a part of our values. That's really important for us. And you will see us talk about focusing on our work. So you look through several of the slides. What you will hear is, of course, our work to be big and bold. Also, our desire to work as a team, how important that is for us to achieve our goals collectively, and then focusing on the work. One picture I like to spend a little bit of time on, this is the Wilson crew team here, and that is an amazing picture. If you've ever seen a crew team practice or perform or compete, it's a synchronized event, and they are successful when they're actually working together. When I first came to the city, I lived for about a week in a hotel because my place wasn't quite ready, and it was near the Anacostia River, and I was able to see a crew team practice. Not sure which one it was, but it is amazing to see what happens when they work together. We believe that's true for our work as well. When we work together, we're going to see amazing things and even more amazing things, because great things have happened in DC, but in this next phase, we believe working together will help us to achieve even more. So this picture is very symbolic for us, and you'll often see us refer to it. As you all know, in the next few slides, we'll just slip through those, that there was a lot of stakeholder engagement, and this just breaks that down as far as the timeline. This slide gives you information about the numbers of participants when we involve stakeholders in the work, and it also shares with you the key questions that we used when we were having conversations with those stakeholders. This talks about the types of interactions we had with the stakeholders. And then this picture shows the important parts for us, which is all the work coming together so that we're focused on students. And we want every staff member, parent, and student to be known as a critical part of our work. On this slide, this is a graphic that has guided our work. If you've seen some of the information that's out for publication, you will see what looks like a slim plan, and you're probably wondering, wow, is that all that there is to it? And I've actually heard that question. So that plan that you've seen is not really a slim plan. What you will see on this slide is what it represents all of the work. So we started the work with our aspirations, which were led by our vision and our mission. We will share that vision and mission with you. And from that, it led to a theory of action that guides the work. Priorities were established, and we will discuss those 5 key priorities and measure so that we can measure our work, and then you'll hear about our initiatives. I'll talk a little bit about the initiatives. The initiatives is where the work really lies. There are 18 initiatives in our strategic plan, and in those 18 initiatives, we consider that to be the guiding force for the actual work that lies underneath each of our 5 priorities. The initiatives is where we actually do the work. On Wednesdays, as an example, today is Wednesday, and we have our work plan meetings, and we sit in those meetings and we plan the next steps and work collaboratively with everyone at the table to talk about what are we going to do next for each of the initiatives. And I'll give you a chance to see those 18 in some upcoming slides. But that's where the work lies, and the measures are there for us to measure our success. As I mentioned before, there's the vision and the mission. So I won't read it to you, but I'll give you a minute to review our vision statement. And this statement is about every student, and you hear that often in our work as well. The mission statement is up next, and it talks about what we expect from every school. A key part of that is every school, and another word that stands out is guarantees. Sometimes in plans you will see we hope for, we strive for, but it's our goal and our intent to actually guarantee the success. So, given our vision and mission, seems like it's disappeared for the audience. From our vision and mission, we mentioned, I think I mentioned before that there are values that are guiding our work, and these are our 6 values: student first, equity, excellence, teamwork, as I mentioned before, courage, and joy. The graphic earlier discussed our theory of action, and we talked about how it guides the work. And this is our theory of action. I'll give you a moment to review it, and there are some highlights that I'd like to point out from our theory of action. You will see that the theory of action talks about how we will support schools. We believe that schools are the locus of power and control. Schools have the ability to really move the work. We don't believe at any chance that we in central office are the key drivers. Schools are the drivers. They're with the students every day, and it's our job as central office leaders to support schools, and that's important for us. And as we support them, we're supporting them, making sure that the work is aligned to the strategic plan, because the plan was created collaboratively with everyone in mind. You will see the next portion of the theory of action about providing excellent service to students and families, and we believe that's the vision of the school and the purpose of a school, is to provide excellent service to the families and our students as well. One thing that's really important to note, you might have heard often about our work about autonomy. School principals are the amazing leaders that guide the ships of the schools. And when we talk about autonomy and we talk about having accelerating the student learning around equitable practices, equitable is not the same as equal. We know that you cannot move schools, you cannot close the achievement gap by treating everyone exactly the same. If it was that easy, someone probably would have coined it a long time ago and been able to pass it out to provide success. What the Chancellor and I both believe that will provide success for our students is working and looking at students individually, having individual plans, having individual efforts around individual schools. We don't believe that everything can happen, will make everything, if we just to dole out the exact same thing to everyone, will we by chance ever be able to close the gap or see achievement. I've now been in education probably 27 years, and all this time I would have been there. If there was one magic pill, I'm sure someone would have invented it, but there isn't one. But a part of the success of school and schools being successful is being able to individualize. And so we believe that within all our schools, there'll be some things that are key for the school district. There'll be a menu of options for schools to choose from, and then schools will be able to work collaboratively to provide innovations for their schools that will help drive the efforts within their individual schools, and that's the key. We will talk a little bit about next about our priorities, as I mentioned, those 5 priorities, and then the 18 initiatives, but that doesn't take away from the core work. And by the core work, that means we still will have to hire staff, we still will have to provide the business of payroll and those core functions of making the school happen, but the priorities are things in addition to just the core work that we do every single day. So there are 5 priorities, and one is promoting equity. And to the right-hand side of this, it has our equity, what we plan to do with equity, but also on the right-hand side, those are the things that I mentioned before are the initiatives. So there are 18 total initiatives. So when you look under promoting equity, you see the 3 initiatives that exist under promoting equity. And for those initiatives, that's where we're working in our work plans. The next one is empower our people. There are 3 initiatives with that one as well. Ensuring excellent schools, and then there are 4 initiatives. And then the next one is educate the whole child, and you will see that this one has 6 initiatives, and it has the largest number of initiatives that you see. And then finally, it's engaging families, and there are 2 initiatives there. What I've noticed being brand new to the district is that most things, when I came in as a person who's done education for a long time, and I have questions about where do we discuss, example, graduation. And so I wanted to see where in the plan are we discussing graduation. It fits perfectly in the 4th priority, definitely in this action initiative, which is 4.5. So what I've seen and what is brilliant about the plan is that it was a very thoughtful plan that covers every aspect of doing school. I have yet to think of where should it be and not be able to see where it fits into the actual 18 initiatives, which is a great accomplishment for the district. And then finally, one thing that's been well publicized are the big goals that's guiding us and what we're aiming for. So by 2022, these are the big goals. And so we have a vision and mission, we have 5 priorities, and underneath those there are 18 initiatives that we're working towards. And the ultimate goal is that we will see the result in these 6 big goals. And so we want to double college and career readiness. We want to definitely accelerate early literacy. And those 2 are very important. In order to be college and career ready, the foundational skill is for you to read on grade level. And so you'll see that we want to accelerate early literacy. If you read on grade level by 3rd grade, it exponentially increases your opportunity to graduate. If you don't read on grade level by 3rd grade, it reduces that number. We want to increase high school graduation rate. And the 4th one is about the student experience. Every single student in DCPS, we want them to feel loved, challenged, and prepared for school. We believe that those 4 big goals will lead to excellent schools, which you will see as the 5th big goal. And then finally, if we have excellent schools, we know that our enrollment will increase because everyone will see that as a viable option. So I zipped through all of those slides to stay within the time frame and also to allow for questions. So at this time, Shanita and I will be happy to answer any questions, and also after you've reviewed, the questions will be a great quiz for me, so that make sure that I've learned all I should have in these past 2 months. But also afterwards, I'm also available for individual meetings if you have questions about the strategic plan or questions about the work that I'll be doing with social, emotional, and academic development for DCPS. So thank you, and we're open to your questions.
Thank you. Board members, Mr. Jacobson.
Thank you, President Williams, and thank you so very much for to you both for being here this evening, and to the Chancellor for including the State Board of Education in this strategic plan process. He came and spoke with us early in his tenure, and we very much appreciate the dialogue, and he has followed up both with our team, with individual board members, and certainly with our president. And I can't tell you how much that means to my constituents who don't feel they have a real voice in education in the city because there isn't a traditional school board in the city. And that connection is incredibly helpful. I just had a couple of really quick points to touch on your initiatives. One of them is empower our people. And that's something that in Ward 2 is incredibly important. We want our principals and the teachers in those schools to be making decisions that reflect the communities that they serve. And as you know, a lot of Ward 2 schools don't only serve Ward 2 students, but also a lot of students from east of the river who travel to Ward 2 because we are fortunate enough to have very strong schools. So can you talk to me a little bit about empowering your people and how that's not just passing the buck? Because we've heard a lot of principals saying, oh, the central office won't let us do it, and the central office saying, oh no, that's a principal decision issue. And can you break that down for us a little bit?
I think that, and I'll speak to what typically that means and what that means here. Building principals often feel, as you mentioned, that I can't do because of, and they'll mention central office. What I believe should happen, and the Chancellor and I have talked about this at length, is that once you hire an amazing leader, you let them lead. And so you hire them and you provide the supports for them to be the instructional leaders that they all want to be. When I interview assistant principals or principals who want to move into the role into a different district, they each want to be amazing instructional leaders and not have their hands tied. And so for us, and overall, it means that we provide them with the resources to be very successful as leaders, to address what you mentioned, and give them the autonomy to be able to do what they think is best for their individual school. What you will see on the slide are the specific initiatives around that, about developing and implementing a strategy that strengthens and infuses our defined values, and those were the 6 that we mentioned. Strengthening teacher pipelines, and also strengthening the school leadership piece. And so the part that I just mentioned specifically was about the school leadership. So school leadership is for those who want to go into being a school leader, but also those who are leaders who want to improve their craft, and letting them do what they do is be great school leaders.
Thank you, and I know that my constituents will be holding the Chancellor to that, and really appreciate that autonomy that the principals will have under his vision and leadership. The last piece is very quick because I'm out of time. The initiative on engaging families. I want to speak to an issue that has occurred frequently. I think my colleague Mr. Whedon brings it up frequently, so I hope I'm not stealing his thunder, which is empowering the LSATs, the local school advisory teams, to have actual input into what happens at the school, and specifically on the budget. When an LSAT gets a budget on a Tuesday night and they have to turn it around by Wednesday morning, that doesn't leave any time for dialogue with the community and with the schools and within the school. So could you talk to me a little bit about, just really briefly, how you're going to be engaging families effectively?
Yeah, so specifically speaking to the LSAT, we're really encouraged that the Chancellor came in and saw an immediate value in this group, that there was this establishment of an advisory group for principals to utilize. It is a priority of his. It has been a priority of us, but having the chancellor prioritize this certainly puts weight behind it that this group should be used effectively at every school, not only around budget, and my office certainly promotes not just engaging LSAT around budget, but year-round. And additionally this year, something new that we're launching is that LSATs need to be engaged around the comprehensive school plan. And so ideally, that will allow for more natural opportunities. In our, what we would like to see is every month that LSATs are being engaged. One of the things that we are grateful for this year is an emphasis where we'll be supporting schools more around this. We can't always assume that every school leader has the time to craft a meaningful agenda or knows how to do it if they're just sort of strengthening their LSAT. And so my office will be supporting principals much more strongly this year. And certainly institutionalizing some things next year by making some things policy. We absolutely agree that LSAT is a great asset to our schools.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for being here. My time is up.
Robinson?
Can you talk about equality and what that looks like for schools east of the river versus the rest of schools?
Great question. Thank you for asking that. During the time that I've been here, there have been a lot of conversations about all schools and improving the work and the opportunities in all schools. So I can say that the chancellor is very interested, and so are we, in the opportunity to bring equity to our approach to schools. So for us, equity is to bring to schools what they need and what's appropriate for them. So for equality, we are able to provide, and typically by law, you must provide the same to all groups. But for us schools east of the river and schools on all throughout DCPS, we want to make sure that what we provide is equitable, so that what you see and what you need east of the river is what you actually specifically need, and not that we're providing the exact same to every building. And so in some buildings, some specific things might be needed more than others based on the actual individual needs of the school. Does that help answer your question? Thank you.
Madam President.
Ms. Rhodes?
Hi, I have a question on, or at least can you clarify how you plan to make sure that the strategic, how do you plan to make sure that this strategic plan is going to be implemented into the schools? Because from my understanding, it may not always come up to par to your standards. So how do you plan to make sure that whatever's happening in the schools is what you exactly want to happen in the schools and maybe more?
Great question. Thank you for that question. Because it's always great to write something that looks great or that sounds great, but if it doesn't really move the school and move improvement, then it was just probably paper and just time. So one way that we plan to make sure that it actually gets to the schools and impacts schools is to involve school leaders. We use a process where we have people that provide input, similar to the strategic plan, and then we have people that recommend and develop processes and procedures, and then we have the folks who actually perform the work. And so that's one way, is to make sure that that people who are in the schools, the teachers and the principals, are a part of the actual work of the plan. So when we talk about empower our people, when we talk about promoting equity, that they're a part of the work, and that helps to get it there. Another piece is that we want all of it to lead to those 6 big goals, and if you notice, those 6 big goals are all things that sit into the school. So one was making sure that 100% of our students feel loved and challenged in school, and so we will assess that by actually having the survey of students to say, do you feel loved and challenged in school? And so that will be a measure of how successful we have been in implementing the initiatives. So involving them and also having the assessments to occur in the schools. Thank you for the question.
Mr. Whedon?
Thank you, and I'll echo all my colleagues' comments about being here and taking the time to be here this evening. Jack stole a little bit of my thunder around the LSATs. He probably knew that was coming. I'm sure Shanita did as well. And I'm very pleased to hear that you plan to empower the LSATs. I've served on a couple and continue to serve on a couple in the community. And I will say I have been disappointed in seeing funding decisions made over the last 6 months without LSAT involvement and not having a clear idea of what the school budgets are, why decisions are being made, and are they being driven from the central office level, the school leader level, or somewhere else. It's not clear if those priorities align. So I'm very excited to hear what you just said there. The other point I just want to follow up on our students' question. Completely agree, high-quality surveys are critical. I hope those are also independent surveys developed by experts with expertise in polling and data, and the surveys and the tools that we're using to measure these results pass muster, and I don't think that's always been the case in the past. To my question, I want to talk, one of these goals is about re-enrollment and recruitment. What's your plan to recruit and engage families and draw them to DCPS in our competitive landscape?
Great question. As I mentioned before, we believe that when part of it, as I mentioned, I'll say two things. One is when the parents start to see the increases that happen in the goals 1 through 5, we believe that will be a draw. Because I know that in this competitive landscape, when parents have options to choose, they want to choose the best schools for their child. And so a school that they saw a double college and career readiness where all students in K2 are reading on grade level, that would be a place that a parent would want their children to attend, where they saw a graduation rate of 85 to 90%. So one way is, of course, by having attain goals that make our options even more attractive to families when they start to choose the best place for their families. A second way that there's been a conversation around recently is to have an opportunity to be more targeted in the information that's shared, because there are great things that are going on in DCPS right now. There are great things that happen in all of our schools, and making sure that families are aware of that. So having an opportunity to share the great things that currently happen, not just the goals or the what we will attain by 2022, but highlighting for families as they make their choices the great things that currently occur in our schools.
So thank you for that. I would love to have a conversation about specifics. I believe I am the only one here with students currently in DCPS. And my daughter attends her neighborhood school. She's a 7th grader. Could you tell me how many times I have been told why I should attend a DCPS high school? And I'll be making the decision this year about where my daughter attends next year. It won't be as an 8th grader. We'll make the decision, we'll visit open houses and do that this year for both public and public charter schools. Is DCPS selling me on their products at this point?
That's a great question. That's a great question for you. Do you feel like we've been selling?
I have received absolutely nothing from DCPS
Great
telling
feedback.
me why I should enroll in Eastern, in Banneker, in Ballou.
Wonderful feedback.
I could say the same about middle school as well. We made the choice based on our community, not based on the sales pitch from DCPS. So I think there's a huge growth or huge opportunity for growth in this area. I take a little bit of exception. Goals 1 through 4 are great, but as a parent, I'm looking at what's going on in the individual schools, not what's going on at DCPS. I use the analogy a lot about Congress. Everybody hates Congress. Their approval rating's 20%, and I might be being generous at this point, but everybody sends their congressman back to Congress. The re-election rate is 96, 97%. I love my neighborhood schools. I love my neighborhood. That's why I live where I live. You need to do better selling your schools. And I think this is why DCPS has not competed well. The public charters, some of them better than others, do a very good job at selling their individual programs and the great things happening in individual schools. DCPS does not do that. And I'll close, I'm 2 minutes over, but just saying, involve the parents. It's not just the LSATs, but the parents have public affairs, marketing, organizing. What Shanita said about not every school leader has the skills to set a meaningful agenda for a meaningful meeting agenda. The same goes for a recruitment plan or a public engagement plan or a communications plan. Use your parents. They're your strongest resource.
Thank you.
Ms. Carter?
Hi there, thank you for speaking tonight. I have a couple quick questions in regards to the strategic plan. Obviously, these are some very lofty goals, and I love to see that we have such large goals for the next 5 years. However, I do want to ask, I guess, what are some of the metrics? You did talk about a student survey, making sure that to decide whether or not 100% of the schools are or students feel loved. What are some of the other metrics you're using? Because obviously, if you can't measure it, it doesn't matter. These goals are nothing. Who is reporting on these metrics? What are some of the metrics you're using? And do you have an annual plan to follow throughout the next 5 years on what you're doing at each stage?
Yeah, great questions. So that what we have, these are the goals for 2022. What we've established for 17, 18, 18, 19, and up to that point annually are our key performance indicators. So each of those goals are broken out by individual goals. So for instance, if you were to look at my evaluation or my goals for this year, you will see those goals and the targets that we're aiming for under my side of the work for 17, 18, so that we can guide it. So the information that's up to from 16, 17 is where we started from, and then having individual goals for 17, 18 throughout to 2022. So an example of, for instance, I'll use number 1 as an example, and then I'll also talk a little bit about 2 and 3. Well, I'll start with 2. 2 is probably the most popular one. About 100% of our students in grades kindergarten through 2nd grade reading on grade level. And so for us, there are, every school does that, whether it's public or charter, you assess reading ability in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. And so we have specific instruments that we use to guide the assessments of where there should be for every time of the year. And in literacy, it's measured on the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year. So by the end of the year, we can determine how many kindergartners are reading on grade level. And so we've broken down our measures for that specific one annually from 17-18 to 2022. Numbers 1 and 3 are related to each other about college and career readiness. A part of it, of course, is graduation. And so we know the graduation rate from years past, and that's number 3 specifically, and then we have benchmarks up until 2022. Graduating is a part of number 1, being college and career ready. But under number 1, we also have other things that help us to mark whether students are college and career ready. Of course, there's success on SAT, ACT, our work with our career and technical education programs, our students' enrollment into AP classes, as well as dual credit classes. And so we have benchmarks and metrics around that for number 1. So there are examples of those for each of those, and marked out from 17-18 up until 2022.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Madam President. Dr. Legrand, welcome to Washington.
Thank you.
We're excited about what you'll be doing in the system, especially the focus, the renewed focus on social emotional learning. So thank you for agreeing to join us, and we're excited about your work. And Ms. Burney, obviously, you've been a strong partner with our families in Ward 8 specifically, but around the city, and you lead a great team in your office. I just have a few questions, so I'll just give them to you, and then let you speak. So one, I just wanted to echo my colleague from Ward 6's point about really selling our schools. I'm one of the few members on the board who represent more public charter schools in my ward than DC public schools, and you know, we want to make sure that DC public schools are competitive in our communities when parents are making choices, because I believe, as I know many of my colleagues believe, that we have to protect our public school system, and the way to do that is to drive our families back through those doors. So I did want to mention that. Now, the couple questions that I had, one, I'm one of the co-chairs of the high school graduation requirements task force that some members of the DCPS team currently sit on, and one of the questions that we have been mulling over for our past few meetings is about the language of college and career readiness, and whether being ready for college and being ready for career is the same thing, and whether that looks the same. And so my question on that would be, do you think they are the same, or are they different, and how is DCPS over the next 5 years approaching preparing students for college and career? And then my second question is, consistently residents have been frustrated with what they feel is a lack of transparency by DC Public Schools, and how, and I think there's an opinion by some folks that DC Public Schools loves to look good, but under the surface there may be more issues than we're letting on. Is there, and I know we talked a little bit about data in the strategic plan, but I think it's a hope of a lot of our residents that we use data as an honest accounting of how we're doing, and really use it, as someone put it, as a flashlight and not a hammer, right? So I think our residents would be excited to hear, well, this is where we're not doing so well, but this is how we plan to do it. And I don't think we hear enough of that honest accounting by DC Public Schools. So I'd like to hear your opinion on that. And my last question is about your section around empowering our people. And I have a deep belief that empowering our people in DC Public Schools is not just about empowering your staff members, your team, but also empowering families and the communities that surround them. And I know that Chancellor Wilson is overseeing very robust community school programs in Oakland, and I know you have you've seen some successful community school models in Indianapolis. I was wondering if those integrated supports for families and that will in turn, I think, spur achievement, right? Those non-academic things that spur achievement. Is there a focus on the community school model in the 5-year plan, and what will that look like 5 years from now? Thank you.
Great questions. So it sounds like 1 is definitely for me, and 2 and 3 will go to Shanita. And I laughed about the community school model because she and I recently talked about it in her check-in. I think it was actually last week. Mm-hmm. It was last week. So we talked, and so she'll be glad to share that great information about that one. So college and career readiness. What you will hear the chancellor talk about is if we prepare every student to be successful in college, they can be successful in careers. And so you also hear us talk about lifting the boat of all, because you'll achieve all goals. And so I agree in that if we prepare students to be successful in college, and so that's the key. So what is the indicators for success? For years it used to be successful scores on ACT and SAT, but studies have come back to say that's not just the key. There are other parts for you to be successful in college. And so if we are to prepare students, in addition to SAT and ACT, if we are successful in preparing students for college, then they can also be prepared for careers as well. The slight difference that I'll also add to it is that for students who want to and desire only to go straight to the world of work, that is a difficult accomplishment unless we prepare them in high school to have an industry certification. So I'll say that to go to the world of work, and I'll say, and make a livable wage. So students can graduate from high school and get a job, but to graduate from high school, but and then be able to have a livable wage to sustain themselves and their families, we would have to make sure that they're leaving our high schools having a certification of industry certification of some kind from our CTE programs, and that will help them for those who want to go on. But I do believe they can be one and the same, except for, and even if you have an industry certification, you might go on to the world of work, but you could also go on to a 2 or 4 year college and go to the world of work and be even more successful. But if we are very focused in having them be successful in college based on what we've seen to be true for success in college, then they could also be successful in the world of work. Does that make sense? I like to always throw in the livable wage, because students often say, I want to go to college, I just want to get a job. And then we want to tell them, let's talk about what the job really means. We want you to have a livable wage. And if you took the time to Google that for DC, that's a pretty high livable wage. Your wage must be very high to be successful and live in the city. So it's important for us to educate our students about that as well. So Shanita, I'm sure will be glad to answer those other 2 questions.
Yeah, happy to. So for question 2, around transparency and the lack of consistent transparency in DCPS, just quite simply, we need to do better. I think that we have done better over the last 3 to 4 years, and certainly have a lot more growth to do. Recently, the Office of Family and Public Engagement rethought our theory of action. And part of that theory of action, there are 4 parts to it, but part of our theory of action is that in order to ensure that families and our larger DCPS community are able to support ensuring students are successful, we have to increase transparency, specifically around how our decisions are made in DCPS. It's a hard thing to do when you're working in a bureaucratic organization where decision-making is sometimes complex, even though it should be really simple. We know the reality that just sometimes it's not. It is our job, however, to not have that be reflected in how we communicate to families. So that's an area of focus that we will be digging more deeply in over the next 5 years. And the Chancellor has not only endorsed that new theory of action and all the components of it, he supports and believes that it's the right way to go. Now, with respect to the community schools model, we sort of chuckled at each other because I am on fire for community schools. I am totally with you in that it can be a component of a turnaround strategy for schools that could just be a game changer. And so that, we have been, my team in particular has been talking a lot with folks that are invested in community schools in DC, especially since the mayor has invested funds in it over the last few years. There are partners across the city that are really doing great work in our schools, and we're interested in elevating that even higher, learning from the folks that are doing it and doing it well, as well as from in our surrounding districts. We joined you on your bus tour to Baltimore to learn about their community schools. But we're really interested in ensuring that as we're thinking about new ideas and initiatives in schools, that principals can really own, develop, innovate around. Community schools is something that we're pushing really hard for. So it's actually in our metrics or our benchmarks for success in our office. That we're able to pilot some of this work and or go deeper in the community schools that are currently in place. So we'll continue to update folks around that.
So welcome. Thank you. Welcome to DC, and I see Ms. Burney, so welcome as well. And I also want to say we're Twitter pals, and it's nice, so I see your face a lot, and it's nice to see you in person. I first want to really appreciate and thank you. One of the very first things that the Chancellor did that I knew of when he came in was to take very seriously the fact that in my ward, Ward 3, where I come from, there's no room in the schools for the students. And it's very sad for the students who don't have room, and it's very sad for all the students who used to come to those schools who were disallowed to come from out of bounds because there was no more school, there was no more room. So there is now, I think, a very productive, we'll see where it goes, but there's been a very productive process going on to try to understand what the needs are and how to put them in place. And I really, very sincerely, on behalf of all the people who are involved in that, this is an issue that has gone, just been neglected for way too long with very damaging consequences, and we are so glad that it is on track. So thank you very, very much. Now to my other parts. So I just want to sort of agree with the points that have been raised about the LSATs, about the budgets, about the transparency, about the lack of responsiveness. And you guys are you're the new team in town. Even if you were part of the previous team, you were part of a team that was trying to do a good job. This is really a chance to try to reverse the realities that have led to those perceptions, to those realities. And I also want to pick up on one thing that Marcus said. Marcus and I co-authored a piece for the city paper this summer, and in preparing for that, I interviewed a lot of different teachers who were leaving the schools. And what Marcus said, I cannot tell you how many times I heard it, which is our schools feel like their job is to look good, not to do good. I cannot tell you how many times I heard it and how distressing, obviously, it is. And I think the pinnacle of that is what we all hated to see, which was what turned out to be going on in a number of the schools around the suspensions, where people felt like instead of actually helping our students and our teachers have non-chaotic classrooms, people felt like the right thing to do was just to suspend kids and not say so. So if you could have one goal, I wish it would be that 3 years from now, 1 year from now, when you ask people, that's not, they would say that has really, really changed. And we now know that our job is to do the right thing and to figure out how to do the right thing, not just looking good. So around that, I want to raise what I think is a kind of a thorny issue for you guys. And I agree with there's the great goals, and I agree with them. How do you reconcile really motivating people towards those ends when there's an accountability system in place that recognizes a very important but very narrow band of outcomes? The reality is all the schools are going to get 1 to 5 stars on their report card next November, and the way it's going to work is what's going to matter almost entirely is going to be reading and math test scores. It's not going to be socioeconomic, socio-emotional learning. It's not going to be, and this is something I care a lot about, it's not going to be social studies and science and the arts. So how are you going to reconcile that? Now, I'm sure what you believe and what I believe is if we do all these good things that are in the plan, that will eventually lead to higher test scores. I totally believe that's the case, but it's not going to do that in 1 year. And I'm going to turn it over to you, but I want to say one very specific thing about that. One of the things I really follow is sort of reading comprehension and how social studies and science and the arts in particular build the background knowledge and the vocabulary that allow you to read well as you progress. And I can't tell you how much I am supportive of the idea of everybody should be ready to read by the end of grade 2. I also want to say one of the things that happens in a lot of places is when there's so much focus on just reading, decoding, grade 2 skills, what gets wiped out is the social studies and the science and so on and so on. More so when all of the focus is on the test scores and reading. So how do you plan to navigate that?
Great questions. Since you follow me on Twitter, you mentioned some of my passions, social emotional learning as well as the arts. The way that, and this is not new to DCPS or new to our time, I believe the accountability model probably started when I started teaching in the late 80s. But during that time, we struggled as educators to understand why we're just testing everything. And so what the key is for teachers and for us as leaders to really show teachers is that you can actually do both. And so in elementary school, for instance, in science and social studies, there's no better nonfiction text than there is in to teach science and social studies, because it's great nonfiction text. What we have to do is to help teachers to understand the balance. They feel the pressure of having ELA and math scores and having it grow by double digits in some places, or they all feel the need to grow. But we have to show them how it's possible for that to happen with using all the subject areas and not just drill and kill for ELA and drill and kill for math. Because when you feel the pressure, I think that's the automatic default, is to think I must just drill and kill students in order to get them to be successful. So it's us as leaders to be able to share with them how those things, you can see success without having to go to those extremes. And many teachers have been very successful. So I can say back in the dark ages when I was a high school math teacher, there weren't as many examples, but now there are several examples within a teacher's own building where they can see that teachers are being successful with ELA as well as math by also having time with the other subjects as well, and also with art, and what art does for our students, and having exposure to the arts. For social emotional learning, that's true as well. That is probably the newest thing for us to have to share clear, because there aren't as many examples, because social emotional learning has started to really grow in our country in the past 5 to 10 years. But for them to see the success in having science and social studies and having a balanced approach with our students, we have several examples, and we can more easily show them how that can happen. For social emotional learning, what we're doing in DCPS and most districts who've started down that path is to show teachers how, like we said, if we address that, then it will easily change the environment of the classroom. And we say easily. You see, what I've been tweeting all this week is to start the day with a warm greeting. It will easily, if you just greet students, your entire class, at the door every morning, that could easily change the environment for learning and lead to them being successful when you talk about English language arts or mathematics. So what we're doing now is educating the staff members on the importance of social emotional learning and how that is a key lever, that when you're ready to learn internally, you will be more successful. And so that's our idea, is to be able to make it simple for teachers, because they have so much going on. They have such a heavy lift, to make it simple for them to incorporate and also see the importance of having a balanced day for students, including science and social studies and the arts, but also the importance of what I say, doing the inner core work with students first, addressing those social emotional needs, and how that totally transforms the classroom. That's my philosophical approach, but it's also the practical one I used when I was a principal as well, with supporting my teachers.
And I agree, it will require a lot of saying to people that you're as concerned about what's happening as with the results. So I appreciate that. Anyway, I look forward to continuing to talk with you guys, both as a group and individually. We're very happy you're here.
Thank you.
Again, thank you for coming and presenting to the board. This is very interesting. Last but not least, because I'm speaking least, I just want you to know that I do agree with all my board members that you need to be out here publicizing the great things that you're doing more. I was fortunate enough to have a Ward 7 presentation with Amanda in at elementary education. Mm-hmm. And the information she gave me, I had no idea of what was going on in my ward and how things were improving. I'm not tremendously, but there is an upward climb. And this is the information we need to know, that parents need to know, and other people need to know, to bring our children back to DC public schools, so you have the population to support the programs that you're trying to put in place. So I would like for you all to think about giving the general population this kind of information, because it should not just be someone like me who has it. I want to share it with the people in my ward because I got her permission to do so, but that's something you should be doing actively. And other than that, I was really amazed at some of the programs that are going on in some of the schools that I'd had no idea about, and how there have been some tremendous gains in some of the schools. So again, I think that you ought to be shouting from the rooftops and publicizing the good things that you're doing, because a lot of our parents have very negative aspects, or feel very negatively about some of the things that they've heard about going on in DCPS. And being a graduate of DCPS, that's not very cool for me. So that's all I like to say. And again, thank you for coming out so late in the evening to talk to us, and tell the Chancellor thank you for his plans and his work.
Thank you.
Will do.
I forgot I have to close out now. Thank you again, Dr. Legrand and Ms. Burney. We very much appreciate your input and work, and I hope you will continue to keep the State Board informed and involved as DCPS continues to do its work. With no further business before the board, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The meeting of the State Board of Education will be adjourned at 7:14 p.m.
That's great.